Welcome to the Screaming Blackbird podcast. In this show, we will talk with military officers and professional leaders to explore Air Force careers and engage in leadership dialogue. The Screaming Blackbird podcast is created by the cadets at Air Force ROTC, Detachment 605 at North Carolina A&T State University. The contents of this show are for educational and entertainment purposes only. They do not contain any official information nor opinions of Air Force ROTC or North Carolina A&T State University.
Appreciate you guys. See ya. See ya. Good morning, Major Spinks. How you
Good
doing?
morning, Cadet Willis. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Good. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, welcome to UNC. You brought the good weather with you.
Thank you very much. Where are we sitting right now?
So you're actually in front of the UNC Old Well. It's one of the historic features of this campus. It was one of the first things ever installed. So sandwiched between the first two dormitories to ever exist on this university. So pretty historic site. And they say when you're a freshman, if you drink from the well, you're embodied with wisdom and knowledge, and obviously, hopefully our cadets are drinking out of there. It seems like they are. So.
Outstanding. Gotta love the superstitions.
There's some up here. Maybe ghosts too, but we'll get to that.
Welcome everybody back to the Screaming Blackbird podcast, episode 22. I am your host, Cadet Jackson Willis, and today I'm joined with Major Spinks. We're here on UNC Chapel Hill's campus, where Major Spinks is an assistant professor of aerospace studies, and we're excited to have him. So would you please introduce yourself to the folks, your background, where you grew up, went to school, commissioning source, and where you're at today?
Yeah, happy to do so. So as we talked about, I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, born and raised there for about 21 years. So it was just instinct to go to the University of New Mexico. I initially wanted to be a doctor, didn't work out, really bad at math. They made me an aviator instead, but I joined ROTC, so mostly out of financial need. I went into college. My parents hadn't been in college. Both of them were prior enlisted. My dad served in the Army for 4 years, got out. My mom served in the Marines for 4 years. Almost 8 years, did her active duty time, then did the reserves. And we were at a recruitment fair when I was a senior in high school and ran across the Air Force recruiter, signed a card, and the rest was history. Showed up to NCOP and did 4 years. Got a degree in criminology, got selected to go to CISO training in Pensacola, and ended up here. So after multiple assignments, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, but very happy to have this experience to be here at UNC to teach the next generation and show them the things that I didn't know when I was a cadet. So
awesome.
It's a very cool opportunity.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you on today. It's
you.
exciting. Congratulations on making major. That is
I'm old, yeah.
an extenuous career.
If you say so, yeah. I happened on that one by happenstance. So, I think one of the things with the Air Force that's really unique is that, personnel requirements, it kind of ebbs and flows, and based off of the needs of the Air Force and your time, a lot of it is time-based. So I would say that I'm a victim of circumstance, but there was some work involved, different programs that I tried to do and different opportunities that I pursued. So, that's one of the great things about the Air Force is if you're doing the job, they reward you. They reward you with more work, but sometimes promotions too. So
Gotta love a meritocracy.
yes.
Terrific. Well, let's talk about the end of your ROTC career and the beginning of your Air Force career.
Oh, gosh.
How was it receiving your AFSC and then getting shipped off, going to Pensacola to train to be a navigator?
It was scary, actually. It was my first time ever leaving the state of New Mexico, on my own. Finding out about it, aviation, I had no idea what a CISO was. I don't think a lot of people knew what this was. Back in 2010, they were fleshing out the concept of somebody that could be this multi-role, multi-capable person on different platforms. So I had gone on a tour to Dias when I was a sophomore in college with ROTC. Instantly fell in love with the idea of, I want to be a Wizzo. I really want to be that job in the backseat. And recognizing that's really cool and maybe I have a shot at it. So I was fortunate enough to be rewarded with the opportunity to do it. And going back to my leaving college, I moved to Pensacola. It was a different time in the Air Force, so they were force shaping and voluntarily separating people. So when I went through nav training, I went through a program called Initial Flight Screening at Pueblo, Colorado. So you probably know that now as IFT or Initial Flight Training. Right. But back then it was hey, do or die. You're either going to pass or you're going to fail, and if you fail, you might be retained in a different career or you might not be. So very, very daunting as a young lieutenant coming into the Air Force. But that said, managed to make it through there. Got to Pensacola, started training, had a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, as I'm sure some of my instructors who might be tuning in will note. But ultimately, I was very fortunate that I had a lot of good instruction. I had zero aviation experience, so it was an uphill battle. Took a lot of work, a lot of passion, a lot of tears cried. But that said, I made it through, and I look back at that experience as probably one of the most difficult but most rewarding times in my life. So
awesome.
But it was good, yeah.
It seems like the Air Force always puts you in a situation that's just outside of your bounds, or makes you just uncomfortable enough to where you question whether you want to do this, but you come out the other side more capable, more aware, and more efficient than ever.
You couldn't have said it better. I don't think I could have said it better myself.
Awesome. You mentioned that they wanted to train you to be multi-capable, Wizzo, on different airframes. How was training? Did they train you on different aircrafts, or was it sims? What was it like back then?
It was sims. So we actually had two aircraft that we trained on. So one that you're probably going to be familiar with here soon is the T6.
Okay.
That was my first trainer, first time ever doing just flying instrumentation. They teach you all the basics. They teach you how to read instrumentation. They teach you how to read charts, and ultimately how to communicate as a crew member, because in aviation specifically, you have to know how to talk to somebody on a level playing field regardless of rank. Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing from that is you do that for about a couple months. So I think my time in the T6 was 2 months. But then you go into sims, and you're right, they train you on different aircraft, different capabilities. So when I went through, the first section was general navigation. The next section was electronic support, which was focusing more on like an RC-135 type mission. We did things of electronic attack. That was towards the end of the syllabus of our sim phase. And then there were some WIZO-oriented activities, so self-protection, and it wasn't weaponeering, but we were dropping ordnance, so similar to what a B-1 would do, which I have no experience with. But they trained us on all of that, right? So what did all that mean? We're doing all these different sims, these different activities. They wanted somebody that was well-rounded, but ultimately it gave you diversity in different ideas of how the Air Force works, how air operations work. So I found it extremely valuable. There were times, again, I struggled through some of those basic aviation components, had my share of frustrations, but I think it made us more well-rounded aviators, and that culminated in our time in the T1s. So another aircraft, if you end up going heavies, which, knock on wood, you go to NJEP, but T1s are a great plane, a two-engine aircraft, jet plane, and we were just working with a contractor pilot, which they still do to this day, with an instructor sitting right behind me evaluating my approaches into fields, my high altitude navigation, my low level navigation. So just a plethora of different things. But all in all, it was I think the intent was you can go to AWACS and then we can move you to F-15s, which we have not seen come to fruition. And I think right now the UCT training, undergraduate CISO training, has gone back to that. We're going to have them taper off into different support functions earlier on. So you go general navigation now, or you go electronic attack, or you go self-protection. So, but I haven't been back to Pensacola since, so I live in fear of it.
Wow.
But I have a lot of friends that work there, and they're all great people. So
it sounds strenuous, and it sounds very complicated.
It is.
When you're being trained on different aircraft, is it like learning a completely different language?
Yeah.
How do the different planes operate with each other? Are some a lot easier than others? Or are they all, do you just have to restart and relearn a different plane every time?
So it was relearning different, it was the same simulator but with different checklists. So you'll learn this very soon, and to some of your viewers who want to go into aviation-centric specific career fields, checklists run everything. Checklists run the Air Force, from your in-processing to leave web to, anything under the sun. Everything has a checklist. So in terms of specificity with each of those aircraft, general navigation was an introductory checklist is how I look at it, which ended up becoming my career. But some of those other ones had more diverse features. So it has different, on the sim itself, has different panels, different functions that are enabled for certain scenarios. So it's built to be dynamic, and even now, after I graduated back in 2013, February of 2013, They've changed the syllabus, they've changed the way that those sims work, and they've even moved those sims onto the T1. So when I was a CISO going through training, I sat in the front seat and that was it. And then I had a buddy riding with me who's sitting in the back, just hanging out, waiting for lunch. But now, because the demands of the Air Force and the needs of the Air Force, they've introduced a simulator in the back of that as well. So when you have one person doing low levels and they're flying and avoiding all of these specific things that they need to avoid, the person in the back is also running a sim, and they're making sure that they're weaponeering that specific system to do this or to counteract, some threat on the ground. So it's a really cool use of resources and function, and it's making a better, more dynamic aviator, at least in terms of CISO training. So, and I've seen that come to fruition on the 2 platforms that I've been I'm on, working with EWOs, working with ABMs, working with all kinds of different aviators, and obviously pilots. But in my experience, I've seen CISOs, and it's just really cool the way that they dynamically interact in both their jobs and with others in other communities.
So you finish training,
yes,
and then you get sent to your first assignment.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
I can, actually. So I left, before I went to my first assignment, I actually went to SEER. So as an aviator, you go to SEER up in Spokane, Washington, and I went in the dead of winter, so it's very cold. But in between that process, or after that process, I went to Tinker Air Force Base. So Oklahoma City was my home for about 5 years. When I first landed there, they don't just put you on a giant Boeing 707. They don't just say, go fly this. There's an initial qualification training. So with that, it's I want to say it was about 3 months of academics that I had. We did multiple on-the-ground sims, so you get fluent with the control panels, you get fluent with the checklists, and working as a member of a team, you have 2 instructors who are playing crew members, so you learn how to communicate effectively. And then after that, I went to my first home, which was the 966th, as a trainee, the Eagles, and I had 6 sorties for general navigation to my mission crew readiness phase. And what that meant is they start you slow, right? Before you run, you have to walk, right? How am I going to do on my first flight? And you'll hear this in terms of UPT, but they'll call it your dollar ride. It's basically a free ride, your first training ride, an M1 sortie for me, a Mission 1 sortie, but with that, it covers all the basics. They're trying to give you familiarization and teach you the orientation of how this aircraft functions. What is takeoff like? What is it like when you're leveled off, and what should you be thinking about next? Where are you at geospatially? Like, as a navigator, if I lose my place, we're in trouble. The pilots are obviously tracking along, but if the navigator doesn't know where you're going, you're in deep trouble. So thinking about different things like aerial refueling, orbit functions. So when we get to a specific place in air, in space, what are we doing, right? Why are we out there? So in AWACS, my first plane, we had air battle managers in the back of the aircraft who did various different roles, and you should get an ABM on because they'll tell you all about the different functions, and they know a lot more about it now than I do. But basically, they're controlling aircraft, they're controlling fighters, they're controlling tankers, they're controlling these dynamic scenarios that they're basically wargaming every time they go out and train. So they're preparing for the next fight, and the benefit of that is the fighter aircraft are getting that support function, right? They're getting that advisory information from AWACS, and AWACS is trying to deconflict all of these different planes moving at all these different speeds at different altitudes. So it's really cool to see, and as a navigator, I was very excited to be exposed to all of that. But that said, finished training. Took me a few months because, there's a lot of old jets, they break.
Yeah.
But finished training, and then I went out to the 963rd, which was my first official operational unit. And from there, I had 2 deployments out of that. So my first one, I was just a baby nav flying with a crew in UAE, and we were fighting still in Afghanistan. And then we were transitioning to fighting ISIS. So this was back in 2014, 2015. And it was a wholly unique and different environment. We went from, all right, we're going out and we're controlling this group of fighters in Afghanistan where they don't really have any aerial capabilities, to, oh no, ISIS just popped up and they're invading Iraq and Syria, and what are we going to do about it? So A lot of long days. It was about a 6-month deployment, and to say that I learned a lot on that first deployment is an understatement. You learn how to interact with people. You get to see the true side of the people that you work with. So it was a very unique and very cool experience. Also, fun fact, AWACS has 2 ovens, so I became a master chef during that period of time. But it's the creature comforts, right? So did that first deployment with the 963rd, and then went back to Tinker after my 6 months. So because I'd flown so many hours during that deployment, I was immediately sent for upgrade, so to become an instructor, so I could train more baby navs on how to be AWACS navigators. So it was a really cool experience, and then had another deployment after that, but we can talk about that later. I'm rambling now. So
No, this is awesome.
getting off topic now.
So you said you trained for a long time.
Yeah.
Then you got deployed, you got a ton of hours.
Oh, yeah.
Then you came back and you got upgraded to an instructor.
Yep.
How did your mindset shift from just training and learning the basics, you make a mistake, it's okay, you learn from it and you do better.
Yeah.
Then you go downrange and you're fighting the fight and everything's serious, there's higher consequences.
Totally.
Then you come back and you're trying to train that new class of baby navs.
It's tough.
How is it?
I think this is actually a really good pivot to ROTC, but it's tough, right? How do you tell somebody what they need to know when they've never experienced it? How do you instruct somebody through a situation that's new and different to them, right? And even though I had enough hours to upgrade to instructor, I kind of had imposter syndrome a little bit, where it was me not questioning myself, but not understanding that the way that I initially viewed that training, that thing that I had to teach somebody, was the only way. It was broadening that picture for myself and figuring out a way to translate that message. So the difficulty with that is you can't oversell it, you can't oversaturate somebody, and they call this the fire hose effect, and you'll learn it when you go through UPT. You might have learned some of that through field training prep. I'm sure some of your viewers are going through that right now with their leadership laboratories, but if you try and inundate somebody with all of that information at once, there's no way they're going to absorb it all. Like, people are sponges. Like, we soak up a little bit, and one of the metaphors that I use with my cadets all the time is you have to view every situation, every problem as a whale. You're eating a whale, right? You got to take little bites out of the whale. You can't eat a whale all at once. So one of the biggest lessons I learned from instruction and in that early situation from my deployment to a non-combat training environment is, let's just focus on the basics. Let's get this person prepared and evaluate if they are capable of handling this amount of stress, and then building on that. So something that you said earlier resonated with me is, they don't give you more than you can handle. And as an instructor, you have to find where that threshold is. Because the minute you push your student over that threshold, you push that cadet over that threshold, it's tough to get them back. Not everybody has that inherent and built-in resiliency. So as instructors, in the different various platforms and opportunities I've had to teach, it's figuring out, what does my student need? What can I give them that's going to make them better?
Right.
So that was what I learned from being an instructor in the combat and then the training environment. So
Awesome. So you've been around the block, you've been operational, you've been in training, and then you've trained baby navs.
I have.
How does your experience in your career translate to your new assignment, which is ROTC?
Well, I had done it. Yeah, I was a trainer for a very long time. So instructor and evaluator. So it was a lot of hours spent training. But how it translates to ROTC is, I went in thinking that my perspective, my stories were going to sell it to my cadets, and I oftentimes find myself learning things from them. So I'm very fortunate that this school has some of the best. I mean, honestly, all the schools in the Carolina, north, not south, but all of the Carolinas, they're just very sharp, put together, well-rounded students, and I look at all of them, and I think back to my ROTC experience, and the things that they're doing, what I did, it's just not the same. They're doing, it almost seems like 1,000 times more things than I could ever handle. But how I translate that as an instructor is, I want to teach them and give them the information that I wish I had known, going from a freshman in college to that senior who didn't know how to PCS or what it was all about. I want to give them that experience, and really I want them to start thinking about the problems that I don't want to say my generation created, but the problems that your generation is going to have to deal with is the future leaders of the Air Force, because, I'm on a clock. I got, however many years left in the Air Force, and you're about to enter. So, how do I teach you to learn from the problems that I've dealt with? How do I teach you to learn from the experience that I've gone through, that you're able to not have that same problem or face that same situation on active duty? So that's really where I've met those two characteristics, because I can't hand my cadets a checklist. I can, and there's some things that make sense, but ultimately it's finding the balance between what's good for them versus what is helpful and productive for the enterprise, meaning I have to make a quality leader. How do I get this person prepared to go out and do the job that I've done? How do I shape them into this person who can compartmentalize the demands of the job and make sure that they aren't going to hesitate when the time comes? I need them to be able to do that. So it's tough. And unfortunately, not everybody's capable of meeting that challenge. And, I think some people identify that a little bit earlier than others. But bottom line, in the ROTC enterprise, in my situation here at UNC, all of the cadets that are here have a desire to be here. They want to be here. They're engaged in training. So I'm very fortunate that they are all active and prepared.
Right.
They're prepared for whatever Major Spinks has to ramble about for the day. So
That's awesome. It's difficult to see cadets that do not make it through the program. I know when I first started, it kind of hit home with me. It was difficult because I'm going through with these cadets and then they just stop showing up and they're not there. I didn't know the attrition rate was so high.
It can be.
How is it being an instructor and having so many cadets that you pour into and they don't make it through the program? You still try to instill values in them? You hope they make it out? Like, what's that like?
No, you hit the nail right on the head. It's instilling values, but honestly, most of you come in with the values. We're not doing anything to make them more special. We're just trying to teach them to be, if you had a picture perfect, leader, what would that look like? How do we get that person to have that sight picture of what leadership is? And I'd say from my situation or perspective as a cadre member is, it's a little disheartening to see people leave, but ultimately, you'll encounter this on active duty, and your listeners will as well, is on active duty. It's the same thing as, an airman separating, right? Is it sad? Absolutely. Is it disheartening to the organization? 100%. Is it going to break the morale of the unit? Probably not, but each person brings something unique to the enterprise, and, losing a cadet is the same thing as, a staff sergeant separating to go pursue something better, something different, better for them. And, it's no different with cadets. We had a cadet here, a student here. She was wonderful. I thought she was going to make it through to the program. And, because of certain situations, she ended up departing from ROTC. And she's still super interested in civilian service. So, there's always an off-ramp to do something, awesome with the Department of Defense. And there's still a lot of different opportunities out there. So I try not to look at it as I'm losing somebody. It's more they're doing something better for themselves, something that meets better with their goals and their values. And, no harm, no foul. ROTC isn't for everybody. Being an officer sometimes doesn't resonate the same with everybody. So, from the cadet perspective, I'm sure they'd tell you, yeah, it's super disheartening. It's super sad seeing people leave because it happens. I had people at NAV training that did that. They self-eliminated themselves. They didn't like aviation, so it's just a bummer, but, you push through it, and ultimately, as you grow with the experience, that resiliency component of not letting it, I don't want to say not letting it get to you, but not focusing or channelizing so much on the negative of it really, really starts to improve. So,
when you're going through training and you get a new wave of cadets, at what point are you like, okay, this cadet's got it? Is it a certain point? Is it early on? Do they have it and they lose it and they get it back?
Yeah.
What is your experience?
It depends. Every person is unique. I think some cadets, you can see it. There's I don't want to say natural born leaders, because that's not true. Everybody shines at different times. I'm sure if you ask some of the people who've supervised me or people I've worked with, I'm not this stellar rock star. There's been these flashes of things that I've felt like I did a lot in my accomplishments. But from the cadets, there's nothing special about any one person. It's the things that they're doing, these unique, inspiring things that they do. For example, not even cadets right now. We are going through our wave of high school scholarship applicants. There was one candidate. She put together her own nonprofit to discuss like financial planning for people in high school and middle school. Where do these kids find the time for? That's my question. But you know, that's the thing is there's so many unique and enterprising people, and sometimes it takes a little bit for them to come out of their shell. But you know, I will say from the instructor perspective, the most rewarding thing is seeing that person like find their stride. And really, that's the reward for an instructor. Like, there's no inherent natural born leader because everybody fails, you know, and that's one of the benefits of being in the Air Force is, you know, failure is accepted. Not changing from that failure is obviously not condoned, but, you know, you're allowed to fail. And through those failures, you learn very valuable lessons. You learn shortfalls. You learn things that you didn't know you were missing. And you know, when we are supervising or being evaluated as leaders, you know, some of us are able to take that self-reflection piece, and I'm notorious for not doing it, is you have to be able to self-analyze and self-critique and accept that criticism. So those individuals that are able to do that sooner, I'd say those are probably those stronger performers in ROTC. Those people who can really dig deep and figure out, well, I messed this up. How do I make it better? How do I never make this mistake again? Those are the people that are going to be successful. Because when you channelize on that failure, just it's all downhill from there. And
Yeah.
I learned that lesson from experience, Pensacola.
So you've got a lot of experience training. You've trained ROTC cadets and you've trained brand new navigators.
Yeah.
It makes sense now that the Air Force would send you to field training. So how was it getting the call saying, hey, you're going to Alabama this summer to train the next wave of POC?
It was short notice. No, I'm just kidding. They stood up the Space Force field training for cadets. So I had replaced a different captain from Maxwell 2, so I was rolling into Maxwell 4, and I'll be honest, I felt like it was a lot to learn in a very short period of time. That said, you know, always up for the challenge. So in terms of translating the training here in ROTC to field training.
What's up, guys? Cadet Willis here. If you're asking yourself what field training is, it's a summer program that 4-year cadets do between their second and third year, and 3-year cadets do between their first and second year. They go out to Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama and train, learn leadership and airman foundational competencies. Major Spinks was fortunate enough to be selected to be a cadre member out there training the next wave of POC. And so that's what field training is. Back to your regular schedule program.
Those lessons are supposed to be what we're teaching during PMT, right? And maybe you can recall from your leadership laboratory experiences is, did it make sense? Did all those things that you learned for the past, because you came in as a 250, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so all those things that you had learned for all of 2 semesters, did all of that add up and culminate in what you expect out of field training? So?
Yeah.
Where did you think there were shortfalls? Or where did you think the biggest issues were with field training in terms of, you know, not meeting the training and execution?
That's a great question. I think the feedback that we received at field training was a day late and $1 short at times.
Yeah.
So we got up and it was a test for several days. The development started a few days later than I would have hoped for.
Yeah.
But I'm looking through a keyhole at this point, so I don't really see the full picture.
Yeah.
But that was kind of mine and the other cadets' perspective.
And that's totally valid. You know, the fact is you've probably seen it with different videos for different enterprises. So I'll bring up the Army, for example. You know, they've gotten away from this Vietnam era training where they are berating the people going through basic. It's more of a focus on how we improve people. I feel like from my perspective, you know, it's very easy to drink the Kool-Aid and say, let's just scream at people as they get off the bus and demand all of these things from them all at once. But, you know, to put it in perspective, and I'll give you my field training, it hasn't changed since then. It hadn't changed since then. So, you know, is that something that I wanted to participate in? Not particularly. You know, it's probably very frustrating and daunting for people who've never left home to get off a bus and show up and immediately go through this challenge. And especially with not knowing, you know, what the right answer is. And you can get into the nuts and bolts of it, but is there ever really a right answer for every situation at field training, right? you're darned if you do, darned if you don't in some situations. So all that to say, the goal of field training isn't necessarily always an evaluation. There is a component of it where, me as an FTO with my team, I'm assessing my 19 cadets to see, do they have the necessary traits to enter the professional officer course? Do they have what it takes to be future leaders? Do I see that in them? And in the same way that I'm training my cadets here, there are certain things that I'm looking for them to exhibit. I need to see that they can work as a member of a team cohesively. They can be great, they can be all-stars and do everything, but ultimately they have to communicate. In the Air Force, everything is built around communication and trust. So is my team, are my 19 students getting this out of that experience? So I think you're right that some people, didn't get that same, level of engagement. And I think as the enterprise, and not to speak for ROTC, but I think a lot of people are focusing on that there isn't as much development as they would have liked. And to contrast that with what Space Force went through, it's such a dynamic and robust syllabus. I don't know if you have any friends that are Space Force cadets, but they got lectures, they were listening to guest speakers. So for them, it was a wholly different experience. And, when I was a cadet, one thing that differed is my training was 28 days. So how long was yours? 17?
Yeah, it was 17, 18, something like that.
So you missed out on 11 days of fun.
Fun.
But that said, when it was 28 days for me, we weren't just, going out and marching. We had to take our service dress, for the record, which was not fun. I think it was just blues. That said, we had an open ranks inspection. We had 2 tests on the Airman's Manual and the Field Training Manual, which they've changed that several times. And I think they're trying to make it less something that you focus on and channelize on so much as, are you doing the necessary things that we need to ensure that you're a leader? But I was also getting talks from, these individuals who were Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. So, how cool would it be to have that experience as a cadet? This is the one opportunity that you have to meet all of these cadets from all around the country, and not being able to share in that cool experience that really, invigorates you. And through Squadron Officer School, when you're a captain, they call it rebluing. Like, it's a really cool experience to be exposed to what is good about the Air Force, these acts of heroism, or even just getting a talk from somebody who's talking about organizational management, figuring out, well, how can I figure out my enterprise and make it better and make my cadet wing better? What do I need to change in myself? So I think we missed some of that, but I missed some of that from when my experience happened in, 2009. So it's kind of weird because going to field training this summer, it was almost like PTSD flashback, like, all right, nothing's changed except for the length. So, I think it's something that our ROTC leaders are focusing on and recognizing that it doesn't just have to stay this same system. There's ways that we can innovate and make it better so that we are developing the right type of leader that we need for the next fight. So
I agree. And don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for my opportunity to go to field training.
Yeah.
So if anybody's watching, thank you.
Yeah, not on us. We're good. No, I know.
No, it was great. It was a lot of a test, but the feedback that I got towards the end was really transformational in my personal development and my ROTC career.
Yeah.
And I'm able to take the lessons that I learned, bring them back to my ROTC detachment, and then use that to affect change. I think there's a bit of overlap between some debt assessments throughout the year and field training in general. So maybe it could be more development at field training than the debt assessments is where you can do some of the testing.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of good ideas being circulated right now, and you probably heard of some through the rumor mill, but ultimately the enterprise is trying to focus more on multi-domain operations. How do we make these people more diverse, make them more well-developed so they're ready when they commission as lieutenants to understand, I might be a finance officer or a logistics officer, but I know where my role is in this, soon to be AFROGEN ACE product. These people getting ready to deploy to these austere environments almost instantaneously, because not everybody goes, through a year-long training for IQT. Not everybody goes through pilot training or scissor training or intel training. Some tech schools are very short. And, I was fortunate that I had almost a year after completing combat systems officer training before I deployed with exercises under my belt that I was prepared. And anyways, there's people that deploy and it's almost instantaneous. You know, they don't get that shaping experience that prepares them for all of that. So if I'm taking a brand new lieutenant in Space Force or the Air Force and I'm putting them in this austere environment where they have to know what to do, where's the preparation for that? So I do think that the Enterprise has identified that, you know, we need to focus a little bit more on that. We need to be prepping our lieutenants for real world experience and not focusing so much on, all right, they got through field training and now they're just POC and cadre developed them, you know, because Major Spinks is going to be different than not to, you know, your old commander, Colonel Whistler. You know, Major Spinks is going to be a different instructor than Colonel Whistler. You know, Major Spinks is going to be a different instructor than his boss, Lieutenant Colonel Valen. We all bring something unique to the table, but ultimately, there's not one centralized way of development. There's not one way to centrally develop everybody. And I think that's a real challenge for the Dets is how do we meet that mark? How do we fill that gap where people aren't getting what they think they should be getting out of field training or ROTC?
Yeah, you're right. You have to fill the gap, but you also have to share the lessons that you've learned. Because if we've got 400 detachments around the country and they're all learning the same lessons but on their own time and they're not sharing that information, it's difficult. I think we're very fortunate here in North Carolina that all of our Dets do communicate with each other and have joint operations and things like that. Can you talk about the benefit of having a bunch of Dets close to you that are able to talk?
I absolutely can, and A&T and I would say Duke, but I'm on bad terms with Captain Senator. No, I'm just kidding. No, but in all seriousness, it is a wonderful experience. So last year, you might have remembered the opportunity, professional development training called Accelerating the Legacy. Mm-hmm. They flew a C-17 up by Greensboro, close to where you're at, and took them down to Charleston Air Force Base to highlight, you know, the challenges and recognition that the Tuskegee Airmen, you know, experience. Some of that to bring the Enterprise together and show them how beneficial diversity is. So we were able to do that in the entire state of North Carolina, fly 300 some odd cadets in a C-17, an experience that some of them had never flew before that. So that's just one awesome experience where we were able to give those cadets some perspective on what the active duty Air Force is like. And then on top of that, we were able to, hold on.
We've got another one.
It's a busy day at UNC. Hopefully somebody's all right.
I was about to say, I'm about to pray for...
Thank you for your service. Oh, they're right over there. I didn't even notice that. Hopefully they're okay. But yeah, so accelerating the legacy, and that's happening again, by the way. But the cool thing about that is you're uniting all these Dets, and we also have other experiences just within the research triangle. You know, we had a dining out recently. We do deployment exercises, mock deployment exercises just between the three Dets where we extend it out to other universities. And on top of that, we also have the Patriot Games. So Colonel Caranta came out last year to the Patriot Games, and yeah, it was just a cool experience. Hopefully you were there, weren't you?
I did not make it to the Patriot Games last year.
You missed out, man. Yeah. So it was held at Duke. You know, it's one of the cool experiences where we get everybody together with our sporting events. And the awesome thing about that is it's one of those low pressure, low threat, you know, enhanced morale. And to allow all of you as, you know, 100s, 200s, 300s, and 400s to communicate, to cross-communicate, and just let off a little bit of steam. And you'll see that on active duty, too. I mean, there's burger burns, there's squadron parties. Like, morale is such a unique and unifying force in the Air Force and Space Force. So it's awesome to see it happen at this level just because, you know, we have a very small detachment. We're 35 cadets strong. You know, Duke, I think, is sitting at 45, and NC State is close to 80, 85. Mm-hmm. So to see everybody from the Carolinas, I think we had like almost 500, 600 participants. So it was a really unique experience and awesome to have everybody gathered in one location and sharing, you know, just stories of different walks of life and getting to know one another. That's really how the Air Force functions is, you know, that enterprising and networking. You know, if you aren't networking with people, you're doing it wrong.
So the Air Force does a great job of giving a lot of professional development opportunities to some of these college students who haven't made it out of their hometown or never been on a plane before. They give them the opportunity to get some exposure to the big Air Force.
Yeah.
And they do a great job of showing the legacy and the history of the Air Force.
Absolutely.
It's not necessarily in the curriculum as much, but it is shown in these professional development opportunities.
Absolutely.
What is the impact that you've seen that cadets have gotten from some of those opportunities?
If I could count all the ways, like I said, we've got a lot of sharp cadets, and many of them have had awesome opportunities. So one specific that comes to mind is the National Character Leadership Symposium held at United States Air Force Academy. So last year we sent one of our juniors, now seniors, and she just described the experience as wonderful, enlightening, being able to hear these phenomenal speakers and also talk to USAFA cadets about the leadership experiences that they go through. It's such a rewarding opportunity for them to be able to engage with their peers who they are soon going to commission with and figure out, is my walk of life here at UNC that much different than what's going on at the United States Air Force Academy? And really being able to communicate different ideas, different thoughts, different, philosophies on a lot of, I don't want to say political issues, but a lot of issues that impact Air Force and Space Force culture. Is this the right organizational leadership structure? Is this the right way of, addressing differences in policy? And ultimately, it's just one very small experience that we routinely try and send cadets to. But on top of that, I've got another now POC. She had been an intern at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, and she just defined the experience. She's going to commission in the Space Force as eye-opening. It changed her perspective on what she wanted to do in the military, reinvigorated her, and ultimately made her really double down on her decision to join the Space Force and what she wants to do after that. So it's really cool just being able to give people the option to experience things that they might do for, the next 4 years of their life. And on top of that, one last one, I'll top it off, cherry on top. You might know about this one. It's called the You Can Fly Scholarship. So for that, it's intended to allow individuals who have any or no interest in flying the opportunity to go out and fly with any local flying instructor to get a little bit of exposure in aviation. And I think that the Air Force recognizes that not everybody has the same means to be able to go out and get a private pilot's license. So this is one way that we allow and enable cadets to get some of that exposure, things that I probably would have loved to have done long, long ago. Before going to Pensacola, might have helped me out, but or recognizing that, hey, Major Spinks is really bad at flying. I recognize that, or Cadet Spinks is really bad at flying. Maybe I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Not that I'm bad at flying, but no, I mean, it would have helped. It would have made me better prepared, because having zero fluency on how flight instruments work, or what a landing and a takeoff look like, or what an HSI or a airspeed indicator are. I was learning all of that stuff in Colorado. It would have been so cool to have, that option when I was, a freshman or a sophomore in college. And it might have changed my career? Probably not. I was pretty much committed to CISO, but it would have made me have far fewer bumps and bruises along the way. So it is a really cool experience to be able to give freshmen, sophomores, the opportunity to go out and fly. And it hasn't been a thing in the Air Force. So I think the Department of the Air Force is recognizing we need aviators. We need people who want to do this. Let's see if we can get them in a plane and make them feel comfortable doing it, so they're encouraged to do it. So
Trying their best to make people capable and give them opportunities to pursue something, find their passion.
Absolutely.
It's a great thing.
Who doesn't want that? Yeah.
Exactly. So as an instructor here at UNC Chapel Hill, do you know what your next assignment is going to be, your next endeavor?
Oh, you put me on the spot. So I don't know if this is public knowledge yet. Well, it might be. But on the ROTC Instagram the other day, there was an opportunity for a new detachment construct. It's basically a remote operating location for universities that do not have an Air Force ROTC unit. There is one that is about to be stood up in Huntsville, Alabama, the University of Alabama at Huntsville. And I had volunteered for it to put my name in the hat And wouldn't you know it, I was fortunate enough that Colonel Verona, the Southeast Region Commander, selected me to participate in that. So I will be going there probably sometime in May or June, assuming AFPC gets my orders correct. They're really good at their job and they'll get it done. I trust them. But I will move there this summer and I will be teaching AS 100s and 250s, the first ever ROTC class at this university that is very much deep in the heart of space travel, or the future of space travel, and could potentially be the Space Force command. I think that's still being discussed at a higher level than what I get paid, but it's a really unique opportunity, and being able to, as they say, spread the gospel of ROTC, being able to share, the opportunities that ROTC provides, I'm really looking forward to it. That said, I'm going to miss my juniors, sophomores, and freshmen. My seniors are graduating, commissioning, so they'll all be out the door, but it's going to be really hard to leave here just because I have, the best coworkers. I have a wonderful commander, and the cadets are fantastic. It's tough, but, the Air Force constantly demands that we move so that we progress and that we help the mission, right?
Right.
The goal is I have to train the next generation of leaders, and, giving more people opportunities is always a worthwhile endeavor. And I think in this situation, being able to maybe give a cadet or student at the University of Alabama in Huntsville the opportunity to commission, like, how awesome is that? So I'm really looking forward to it. But that's what's next on the table for Major Spinks.
Good. That's exciting. Well, new stuff.
Yeah.
As we wrap up here, we've got 2 listener questions for you.
Oh gosh.
The first one is, as an ROTC professor, which college are you more proud of? Your ROTC detachment you commissioned from, or the one that you're an APAS, Assistant Professor of Aerospace Studies?
You can't put me on the spot like that. I'm going to get my car egged by UNC cadets. Well, UNM Lobos are my alma mater. They're where I grew up. They're who raised me, and I am very proud of where I come from. I think the term in Spanish is orgullo, but I have a lot of pride for my my Det 510 cadets. That said, UNC has been a very rewarding experience. I've had a lot of unique opportunities to engage with cadets that are far more well-rounded than I was when I was their age. I've had the wonderful experience of meeting a lot of different cadets at detachments here in Carolina, and being able to share a little bit of my perspective and stories with them and help them develop as leaders. So I think in terms of being proud, I'm proud of where I came from, but if I had to choose one on the spot, I would say I'm a lot happier here at UNC because they've made the job, and keep in mind I was a cadet at the time, so it wasn't a job. Cadet Wing Commander wasn't a job, didn't pay me. It kind of did, but this being an assignment, this has been one of the most wonderful assignments I've ever had. I couldn't ask for a better location, better place for my family, better place for teaching the next generation. There's something to be said about paying it forward. So I'd have to say UNC in that context, just because, the juniors and seniors listen to me ramble. The freshmen and sophomores, they're wise to it, but, they'll listen to my war stories, all day. So I got to say UNC in this situation.
That's a good answer. It's a safe answer.
I think so.
Last
don't make my car.
That's a good point. We'll see. Last listener question. What quality or characteristic do you see in brand new ROTC cadets that makes them successful in this program?
That's a very good question. Very deep question. I will say one thing that I personally value is being an empathetic leader, being present for your people and understanding that they have their own situations that they have to deal with. So I think from a biased perspective, I think understanding that you have to put your airmen first and really getting to know your airmen, getting to know your cadets, getting to know those people that you work and spend every day with is a defining characteristic of leadership. I think if you can't do that, you can't lead effectively, right? It's like, try being on a plane and, putting your life in harm's way and not being able to trust the person next to you. And maybe that's because I have all of this experience as an aircrew member, but, I'm trusting this person to be able to do their job. I'm trusting them with my life, that this pilot can land this plane in this, difficult situation. So I think being able to trust, but also understand people. Really being that empathetic leader who recognizes, my AC is off today. Why is my aircraft commander why is this pilot behaving this way? Is there something going on? Is there some outside stressor? Why is my senior airman showing up late to work every day? Is there something more there? And ultimately, I think good leaders in this specific area, ROTC, there's a lot of different ways to measure good leadership, but I do think that biased perspective, being empathetic, understanding your people, and understanding how you improve their life, putting them first, that service before self, is probably the most valuable trait that a good leader can have. And personal experience, and you'll hear it, you probably have heard it from your deck commander and your OFC is, there's good leadership environments, there's good squadrons to be a part of, and then there's bad ones. And the ones that have always defined the good ones in my career have been the ones where the leaders care, where the leaders take the time to get to know me as a person, not just somebody working in their organization, but really get to know who Major Matthew Spinks is, and what drives me, what motivates me. Because if you can't figure that out, how do you get them to do the job? How do you keep them engaged? And ultimately, how do you get them doing their best? Because that's what the goal of ROTC is. That's the goal of the Air Force is. We want everybody performing their best at all times, able to meet the demands of the mission. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to make sacrifices in certain areas. There's times where you're going to have to deploy for 6 months and be away from your family. Or there's times where, you're going to be in an exercise and it's going to run counter to going to like your brother or sister's wedding, So it's tough. The Air Force puts a lot of demands on people, but being understanding and working with those people makes it a little bit easier, and recognizing that they're there to support you. If they can trust you as a leader, you're never going to fail. Okay, you're going to fail, but you're not going to fail as hard. So
Right.
It's all balance. Everything is relative, but hopefully that answers your question.
That does. No, more than answers the question. I think
Major Spinks talks too long. That's what he's saying.
It's an important part to have a support system around you, especially in this program that
Absolutely.
has such high demands. And I'm sure in the Air Force you've experienced the same thing.
Absolutely.
Having those empathetic leaders has probably been beneficial to your career. So
It's taught me a lot, and that's the thing is, I can sit up here and rant to all your listeners and you, but the thing is sharing your story and being able to talk to people is extremely important. Just being able to casually have a conversation with any person, from the janitor to a 4-star general, which I would still be very scared of doing. But that said, you should be able to talk to people. We should be able to respect one another, no matter what that person's job is or position is. If you're able to, communicate with that person and really get to know them, it's far more rewarding when you do that. More than just surface and face value of like, hey, how's it going?
Right.
So.
Words of wisdom.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know how wise I am. Tell that to my undergrad GPA.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you for hosting us here at UNC.
It was my pleasure. So hopefully you have a safe trip back. I guess if your listeners have any questions for me, they can always email me at afrotc@unc.edu. But it was my pleasure.
Sounds good.
Thank you for having me, Jackson.
Yes, of course. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. Tune in next time. And other than that, we're signing off.
Later.
See ya.
Bye. Hopefully I didn't botch your interview too bad.
Dude, that was awesome.
You say that, but...